The NFL season starts tonight. Here's my late, but not too late, official predictions for the upcoming NFL season. I'm going to go division by division and give you my picks for each division winner as well as the ultimate playoff seedings I see playing out in each conference. I'm Vish Kumaran. This show is powered by BetUS, and let's get into it. I'm going to start off with the NFC West, where I have our San Francisco 49ers winning the division. Ultimately, this division comes down to the fact that I think the 49ers remain the most talented team. While I do believe in the Super Bowl hangover and other, mythical things where I notice league trends from league history, I feel like this roster is just far too good and they to understand the importance of this season too much. I think the 49ers are prepared for this year. Now, I vehemently disagree with the general take that the 49ers are better this year than they have been in years past. I think this is actually one of the weaker teams the 49ers have had under Kyle Shanahan when we're equating depth and we're looking at particularly depth at each lines of scrimmage. I find this defensive line to be a little thinner than years past, and we could see that by the lack of defensive linemen that they end up kept keeping. And then the improvements in the secondary, I'm a little bit skeptical of the safety position. The starting duo of George Odom and Jair Brown doesn't really convince me, and I'm still wait and see on what's going to happen with Talanoa Hufanga coming back from injury. Obviously, a few negatives here and there aside, they are still the class of the NFC to me and the class of the NFC West. I have them winning the divisions. Not too surprising. I have the Rams second. Stafford's obviously a great quarterback in my mind. Everybody knows how great I think Matthew Stafford is. I think he's one of the best quarterbacks or most underrated quarterbacks generally of my lifetime. Of course, that's not too long of a lifetime, not to call myself too young, but I do think he's one of the better players that I've seen at the position. I feel like it's criminally underrated how good he is at playing quarterback. Unfortunately, wins and losses end up being the only way we rate these guys, and we start to, I guess, forget some of the skills that these guys had that truly made them great. And Stafford is a very skilled player. I think the Rams are improved on both lines of scrimmages. Obviously, the offensive line is much improved. I think Kyron Williams is due for a big season. The defensive line is improved as well. In fact, I would look at the Rams as a sneaky Super Bowl pick had Aaron Donald not retired. Unfortunately, that did happen. I still have them making the playoffs. I think they're the second best team in the NFC West. Third, I have Arizona. I think that Arizona versus Seattle is a toss up and a conversation for a lot of people at the bottom of this division. I actually was impressed with Arizona last year. I hated on them the entire offseason. I didn't believe in Jonathan Gannon, but I was very surprised by the way they competed. And one thing about Arizona, and it's going to be a theme in other divisions where I pick maybe a lesser talented team over another, is Arizona has a clear identity. They know that they want to run the football and they know how they want to play defense. I think there's a lot more good veteran players on this team than people realize. I think Kyler Murray is also a little bit better than people realize. I think Arizona's got a sneaky chance at sneaking into the back half of these playoffs. And I kind of just like them better than Seattle. I think Seattle is going to feel the wear and tear of losing a great Hall of Fame coach like Pete Carroll. Mike McDonald is an outstanding defensive coordinator, but the vibes of the general situation kind of reminds me a little bit of how it was with Brandon Staley when he first came to the Chargers. For all the hate Brandon Staley got the last 2 years, people forget how hyped up, how the analytics community, the film community, Brandon Staley was their next star 2 years ago. In some ways, I'm getting a similar vibe from Mike McDonald, and I don't actually have like tangible reasons why I would tell you I don't feel good about McDonald. I actually think he's an outstanding defensive coordinator, and I think a lot of his reputation is generally fair. He is super smart, and what he did on defense with Baltimore last year was outstanding. All the same, I don't see the same personnel. I don't see a Kyle Hamilton with the Seahawks. I don't see a Marlon Humphrey with the Seahawks, and I don't see a Roquan Smith with the Seahawks, and I do think as good as, maybe a Jordan Brooks is, he's an underrated player. Those are things that he's going to miss in his current situation, and I think because of that, in a lot of ways, I think Seattle will probably be worse than a lot of people expect. I have them finishing fourth in the division. Moving on to the NFC South. Probably the least interesting division, I would say, in predicting in all of the 8 divisions in the NFL. I don't know that there's a lot to this one. I have picked Atlanta to win this division year after year, whether Arthur Smith's the coach, whether Raheem Morris is the coach. I feel the best I've ever felt about picking Atlanta to win this division. They finally have a quarterback. I thought Desmond Ritter stunk. There were a few people obviously high on Desmond Ritter coming out of the draft, and it turned into kind of a groupthink opinion. I was never a big Desmond Ritter fan. I'm glad that that experiment is done. I think Kirk Cousins will bring stability to their team, stability to their offense. They have a decent offensive line, obviously, maybe even better than decent, a good offensive line. Bijan Robinson, in my opinion, is got the ability to be a star. Drake London is an excellent player. I've always thought Kyle Pitts has star potential, though his early career production has necessarily not reflected that. I also think Atlanta has one of those defenses that has the sleeper, possibly next best defense in the NFL. They were very good last year, a very sneaky, excellent secondary with guys like Jesse Bates and AJ Terrell. I think Atlanta will be a very, very good team this year. I know this is something I've projected in back-to-back years, but I feel most confident about it this year. And to me, Atlanta's defense is going to be the one that when at the end of the season, people are going to be like, oh, that's an elite defense. Usually there's one or two that strike people by surprise. I try to find the defenses maybe with the best amount of athletes that maybe haven't emerged or gotten the recognition yet. Atlanta has some serious athleticism on that defense, and I think Raheem Morris is going to take full advantage of that. I have Tampa Bay, last year's division winner, finishing second. I think Tampa Bay is very solid, but I think they're a team that's maxed out their potential. I think Atlanta just has a little bit more on both sides of the ball juice wise. I like Atlanta more than Tampa Bay, but I think Baker will be okay. I think Tampa Bay will be okay, maybe a little worse than last year, but that's more so because the teams that they're playing are maybe a bit better playing that first place schedule. In third place, I have Carolina. Oh, by the way, they played the first place schedule last year um, as well, to be fair. But I do think that their team maybe is not as good and they're not as equipped to handle Atlanta being better, more so is what I mean in their schedule improving. I think Carolina improves a little bit. I think Bryce Young improves a little bit. He was a guy I was very bullish on before the draft. He just had the skills to play quarterback. I was totally wrong. I think Bryce Young can still end up being a good player, but definitely watching him last season for somebody that was talking about, oh, his processing or his accuracy or his ability to create space in the pocket in Alabama, all of those things kind of felt irrelevant because of how small he truly looked. And I think size does matter. Size is a skill, as Chris Sims always says. I think in this particular case, it does affect Bryce Young. Of course, my take on Bryce Young looks that much more ridiculous from a couple years ago. But hey, what are you going to do about it? That's okay. I think Carolina finishes third in this division. I think they're improving at a slow rate. I think they are maybe a little bit better than people are giving them credit for, but not that much better. And then finally, I have New Orleans finishing fourth. New Orleans is an old team. They've been kind of sticking around and lingering around 500 with the remnants of Demario Davis and Cam Jordan and Marshawn Lattimore, who's not too old, but he's kind of old for a corner. And they have now the corpse of Tyrann Mathieu and a few older offensive linemen who have really gone over the hill and the corpse of Alvin Kamara. I think this is the year that it kind of falls apart for New Orleans. I think New Orleans will be one of the worst teams in the NFL. And I think it'll force them to finally perhaps take that full hard reset, which they've been needing to do maybe since before Sean Payton left. That's my predictions for the NFC South. Let us move to the NFC East, where things start to get a little bit spicy with my projections. So the interesting thing about the NFC East is that there hasn't been a back-to-back winner of this division in so long. I think there hasn't been a back-to-back winner of this division in 20 plus years, I want to say. I was sharing the statistic last year. That's why I picked Dallas to win the division last year, which they ultimately did. I feel like Dallas and Philly are two teams that are over the hill. I think they're past their prime, past their opportunity. I don't look at this division, honestly, and I see a Super Bowl contender, contrary to popular belief. I don't look at Dallas as a Super Bowl contender. We'll see with their offensive line, with Tyler Guyton and how that gets integrated. I think they're going to severely miss Dan Quinn. I know Mike Zimmer is a good defensive coordinator, but I don't know that they have the quite right personnel to fit that double A gap, double mug scheme that Mike Zimmer likes to run. I think that they relied a lot on team speed on defense, and I think they have the ability to get overpowered, which they will, I think, a lot on defense. Still think Dak's pretty good, probably good enough to get them 7 to 8 wins. That's why I have them where they are. I have Philly where they are because I just feel like it's made to fall apart. When I read things like, oh, now things are okay between Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni. I hear about Jalen Hurts reading, or you read the article about Jalen Hurts reaching out to Wink Martindale, which is essentially what got Mac Jones to be persona non grata in New England. When Mac Jones reached out to the Alabama offensive coordinators to help Joe Judge and Matt Patricia, it's ridiculous to me that Jalen Hurts did that. I think Philadelphia is a ticking time bomb waiting to fall apart. I think the loss of Jason Kelsey hurts a lot more than people expect. I think this era of Philadelphia Eagles football post Andy Reid has been represented by four key figures: Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, Lane Johnson, and Jason Kelsey. Losing one of those pillars, I think, is massive. I think this year it falls apart a little bit for Philly. I don't trust Jalen Hurts too much. I thought maybe, hey, he proved me wrong as someone who didn't like him too much coming out of college. That season, he was a MVP candidate, and they started as well as they did. He's probably better than I ever gave him credit for, but I still think he's maybe a little bit overrated in the larger landscape of how people talk about him as an NFL quarterback. His running is still the best thing he does, and it's really the short yardage and red zone running that's really special. I think there's a lot else that leaves a little bit to be desired with him. Because of this, ultimately, I feel like Dallas and Philly finish with 7-8 wins. And I think Washington, kind of the same way Mike Shanahan did with RG3, sneak into the back end and win this division. Washington's offensive line is sneakily underrated. Obviously, getting Tyler Biadasz from Dallas will be a nice addition. I think Dan Quinn is going to have that defense playing okay. There's enough veteran players there. And then I like Jaden Daniels. I think he's going to give their offense a spark. It's not me being necessarily high on Washington. It's more I see Dallas and Philadelphia falling off. I think the Giants are slated to be one of the worst teams in football. Therefore, by de facto, I give Washington kind of the lead in this division. I'm thinking Washington will be like a 9-win team. Dallas will be like an 8-win team. Philadelphia will be like an 8-win team. And it'll come down to the final weeks of this season, the way the NFC East used to with Eli Manning and back in the day. This brings me to the final division of the NFC playoffs, which is the NFC North. My bad. The slides are a little bit out of order. That's my mistake. The NFC North, which I have Detroit winning. I've been late to the Lions party. They're good. They're playing most of their games in a dome. I was late to the Jared Goff party. He was always a little bit better probably than I gave him credit for. He can't handle pressure, but he does what he does very well. And I wouldn't have said that maybe a year ago, 2 years ago. I have since amended that statement. He was very good last year. I expect the Lions to win this division. To me, the Lions are a Super Bowl threat. They were that close to beating the Niners last year. I might have even been surprised, if you will, watching that playoff game, seeing how well the Lions competed from a talent standpoint with the 49ers. Not something I necessarily expected. When you look at a guy like Gibbs, he looks special. I think Jamison Williams emerges this year. I think the Lions have improved on defense as well. I like them winning the NFC North. I have Green Bay second. To me, Green Bay is a little bit overrated this offseason. The way they finished the season, while excellent, Jordan Love looked good. They did beat, Nick Mullins and the Carolina Panthers, and that's what they needed to win to get to the playoffs. I still think Green Bay is maybe a year away from being a Super Bowl kind of threat the way people expect them right now. I do think Jordan Love will take a next step, maybe not as big a step as people are expecting, but a next step, and continue to show that he's a good starter in the NFL. I think Green Bay makes the playoffs, but maybe I'm not as bullish on them as the rest of, I guess, national consensus or national opinions. I think the NFC also has a limited amount of good teams, which allows Green Bay to kind of slot in, maybe even if I think they're a tad overrated. I have Chicago third. I think they're a good team. I think Caleb Williams has a very solid rookie season. I think they win 7 to 9 games. I don't know that it's hard for me to look at a rookie quarterback and think they're going to be so impactful in the playoffs and things like that. That's not necessarily something I'm going to project. I think Stroud was one of one, and I think part of what made Stroud one of one was kind of the maturity that he handled the situation coming into Houston, where 2 coaches had been fired back to back, and they signed so many guys to 1-year contracts and stuff like that. I think Caleb is special from a talent standpoint. I don't know that Caleb is necessarily at the same spot life wise that CJ Stroud was to be able to turn a franchise around in that capacity. I still like the Bears, maybe more than I've ever liked the Bears in my life. I like Caleb a lot. I think they'll be a good, fun team, but I don't think they'll make the playoffs. And then I have Minnesota finishing fourth. O'Connell's a good coach. They have a good offensive line. There's parts of this team, if Aaron Jones stays healthy, that can be good. I don't believe in Sam Darnold. I don't believe in Sam Darnold's ability to start long term. That's kind of where I'm at, and that's kind of where I will leave it. Which brings me to my full NFC playoffs predictions. I have Detroit at the 1 seed. I have the 49ers at the 2 seed. Atlanta third. Washington fourth. The Rams getting the 5th seed. Green Bay getting the 6th seed. And then the 7th seed, it was up between a lot of few teams. I went a little bit controversial. Why not try something a little bit? Usually we have a few surprises. I think the NFC playoffs have gotten a little bit stale. And because of that, I chose Arizona. Like I said, Arizona may be a little bit better than expected. And so I have them making the playoffs. Those are my official NFC playoff predictions. Before I get to the AFC, I'm about to share a quick word from our sponsor, our good friend, BetUS. Guys, like I mentioned to you guys at the start, this show is brought to you by BetUS. I am really excited to be partnering with BetUS. They are offering a 150% bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000 with the code YouTube150. I need to repeat that 150% bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000 with the code YouTube150. Guys, this is an amazing opportunity. Please gamble responsibly, excuse me. With BetUS, you guys can just come to this screen. As you can see, I've clicked on football, and let's go to those week 1 odds. I'm obviously already streaming this during the Chiefs and Ravens game. It's already going. You can take the live odds. I have the game recorded. I will be going back and watching from a certain point. Of course, most of us are focused on the Niners and Jets game. Guys, Niners -4.5 is a total tease. I kind of love the Niners in this spot. I feel like it's the perfect opportunity for them to handle a Jets team who's still kind of finding themselves. I feel like a lot of people don't really know who the Jets are going to be with Aaron Rodgers. There's been a lot of weirdness this offseason. I'm really excited to find out. Guys, remember, you can get a 150% bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000 with code YouTube150. Join BetUS today. The link is in the description. Thank you so much, guys. And so that brings us back to the show and my official AFC predictions. I'm going to go through this one maybe a little bit faster, especially given that, I maybe took 15 minutes, a longer time going through the NFC. Of course, I wanted to focus on some of those matchups given that the Niners are in that conference. Starting off with the AFC North, I like the Cincinnati Bengals to win this division. I feel like this is the first year Cincinnati is going to start fast, and it's because of one thing and one thing only. Joe Burrow had a healthy offseason. I think that that's been very underrated. We know about the calf troubles from a year ago. We know about him rehabbing the ACL a couple years back, dealing with, all kinds of injuries in each one of these off seasons, and it's affected each start to the season. Burrow's obviously maybe got more injury concerns than people want to generally talk about in public. Of course, guys like Tua get that label, where Burrow has now been injured, 3 of his first 4 seasons, which is obviously tremendously scary. I think Cincinnati has a very good understanding that this is their last, opportunity to have a team that's going to be this talented, this good. They were able to bring back most of their defense, and I think Cincinnati wins this division. And in fact, I'll even share right now, I feel like Cincinnati will be the 1 seed in the AFC. I have Baltimore second. I do think Baltimore takes a step back this year. I think Baltimore is maybe a little bit older than people realize. I think the signing of Derrick Henry, again, it's another 30-plus old running back. That's not necessarily something that makes me think Baltimore is now definitely better. I think Baltimore has kind of remained the same the last 4 or 5 years. And I think those weaknesses have really gotten exposed over time by certain teams in the AFC playoffs. be it Kansas City a couple of times. Buffalo did it once. Tennessee did it to them. It's almost like we're seeing the same Baltimore team go through it. I expect this iteration of Baltimore to be very good, very dangerous like the rest of them, but maybe fall short just as they have in the past. I have Cleveland third. Guys, I pick Pittsburgh to suck every year. Every year they don't suck. I watched the preseason. This year, fully expect Pittsburgh to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. Those two quarterbacks are not good. I personally would have started Fields, given that I thought he looked slightly better than Russ. They both did not look very promising. I know the Tomlin effect. TJ Watt can do a bunch of random things, and Highsmith can do random things, and Nick Herbig looks good, all of those things. I don't believe in Pittsburgh. Cleveland's far too talented to me to be a worse team than Pittsburgh. There's not that much talent on Pittsburgh. I think Pittsburgh is finally a bad team. That's how I see the AFC North playing out. The AFC South, this one may be a little bit more shocking compared to consensus. Obviously, I have Houston winning it. I think Stroud is just that guy. I think he's steady. I think the way he plays the position just gives you so much to build off of. I think Houston's a better team. I think D'Amico and Stroud also have the right mindset to be able to build off of what happened last year rather than have it get to their head. I have Tennessee second. Tennessee, to me, comes back to the conversation I brought up with Arizona. I feel like Tennessee is going to have a clear identity this year. They're going to run the football. They're going to play defense, and I think that that's going to be able to give them a lot of opportunities in games. I don't think Tennessee is that good, but I think they signed a few players to maybe be more talented than people really expect looking across the roster. I think Will Levis maybe finished the season playing better quarterback than people expected. Now, I'm not going to tell you that I think Will Levis is an excellent quarterback or a future starter or anything like that, but I do think he's got a chance. And if people were bullish on Desmond Ridder last year, for example, I thought Will Levis showed a hell of a lot more than Desmond Ridder has ever showed in the NFL. I have Indianapolis finishing third. In a lot of ways, I love Shane Steichen. I think he's a great coach. A lot of people know of my ongoing. I don't think Chris Ballard is very good. My personal opinions about that aside, the thing that worries me is I feel like the conversation about Anthony Richardson this year reminds me a lot of how people talked about Trey Lance from 2 years ago. And that's nerve-wracking to me when I hear Kirk Herbstreit make the Joe Flacco comment. You can say what you want, just as we did with Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo. He's not making that comment if he's not hearing it from someone somewhere. Indianapolis is a team that worries me. Obviously, maybe they're more talented than I'm giving them credit for, of course, but I just don't believe in Chris Ballard. I think it falls apart. And I think for Jacksonville, this is about to be a disaster year. I think Trent Baalke has been there doing what he did with the 49ers, and that's not doing a very good job. I think it's going to fall apart for them this year. I think they're going to probably get a new coach. I know, crazy thing to say. And I think it's going to lead to a lot of dissension in terms of the national outlook of who Trevor Lawrence is and what kind of quarterback he is. Now, the way I see Trevor Lawrence is he's probably a little bit better than his biggest hater says he is, and he's probably a little bit worse than his biggest fan says he is. Now, that applies for every quarterback, but I think you can draw that closer to an extreme with Trevor Lawrence, where there's fans of him that probably rate him, not extreme fans of him, but probably rate him a little bit higher than they should. And then, of course, there's people that hate on him just because of everything that comes with being the number one player in high school, the number one player in college, the first overall pick, all of that. And I think that this year is going to be that much more polarizing, given that I don't think Jackson will be very good. And I find that to be a little bit interesting too, because I think they are a team that is a change in coach and a change of front office away from being very good. I think there's a lot of talent all over that roster. I think Josh Allen looks like a freaking beast, but I think that it's a little bit of a mess. I think Trent Baalke is doing what he did in San Francisco. I think it falls apart a little bit for them this year. I'm going out on a limb a little bit with that prediction, but that's how I see the AFC South playing out. This brings me to the AFC East. I see Buffalo winning this division. They've won this division in back-to-back, or I want to say 3 years in a row. I think they're the best team in this division because they have the best quarterback in this division. They have the best coach in this division. I think Sean McDermott is historically underrated. He has gotten a lot more out of their defense than talent would necessarily show over the years. I think he went to the playoffs before they got Josh Allen. A lot of people forget he took Doug Whaley and Rex Ryan's team to the playoffs. I like the Buffalo Bills to win this division once again, and I like Josh Allen to take them to the playoffs. I have the Jets finishing second. I don't think the Jets will be too good, but I think the Jets will be competitive in the AFC. That division is good. That defense is good. They'll beat up on bad teams and bad quarterbacks. I have them finishing second. Miami finishes third. I've always felt like Miami's been a little bit overrated the last couple of years. Obviously, I'm not the biggest Tua fan, and of course, that's totally reflecting, in my opinion, of predicting Miami's third. Um, I guess the biggest question marks I have with Miami is I just don't think a finesse team can have 3 straight winning seasons in a row. I know that's a very generalized NFL statement. Surely you can combat me for that reasoning. It's not the best of reasoning, but that's what I'm sticking with. I have Miami finishing third. And then New England to me is the worst team in all of football. There's no question they finish fourth in this division. Of course, now that I said it, they likely won't finish fourth in this division, just knowing the state of my predictions year after year. But on paper, that is the worst team in football for me. And that's going to bring us finally to the last division in the NFL, which is the AFC East. I, of course, have the Kansas City Chiefs winning. Yeah, chalk, dry, oatmeal. They win every year. It's boring. I know. I think they'll win the division again. The Chargers, another team that what Jim Harbaugh is going to do is give this team an identity. They're going to play defense. They're going to compete. They're not going to beat themselves, and they're going to run the football. And I think those are all formulas to winning games in the NFL. I think they will win immediately. Harbaugh has success immediately wherever he goes, even if it's not the biggest success in terms of winning a Super Bowl or a national title immediately, it is winning right away. I think the Raiders are probably a little bit better than people give them credit for. And I know I've said this like 8 different times in this video, and I don't know which general people I'm referring to. Let's just speak to an audience that always seems to hold an opinion differing from mine. I'm joking. But I think the Raiders are going to be able to run the ball this year with Zamir White. I think Max Crosby in this defense is a little bit better than people give it credit for lack of a better term. I think the Raiders are going to be competitive in a lot of games. I think they have a clear identity, and I think Antonio Pierce is going to get them to compete. Bringing us to Denver, who I don't see a lot of positives with Denver. I think media is more positive on them because of the relationship Sean Payton built over his time being in the media. I'm not too bullish on them. And ultimately, I do not see them going too far, obviously, as I see them finishing fourth in the AFC West. So those are my overall divisional predictions for the AFC. Let's get to my AFC playoff picture. Like I teased earlier, I have Cincinnati as the 1 seed, Kansas City second, Houston third, Buffalo fourth. And then there's actually a mistake, as you can see. I have Jacksonville by accident. This was my playoff projections, I want to say, from last year or maybe earlier in the offseason. I have them listed at 7th. The slide is wrong. I obviously do not think that they will be the 7th playoff team, as we can go back a few slides and I have them finishing 4th. A very, very out there opinion of them finishing 4th in the AFC South. Obviously, it's one I changed my mind on recently, which brings me to the 7th seed in the playoffs, which I will be having the New York Jets. I think Aaron Rodgers makes the playoffs. I'm not going to lie to you. Part of me changing my mind coming into tonight was the fact that I couldn't leave out Aaron Rodgers making the playoffs. My whole life, I've always thought he's just that quarterback, just that guy that's so special. It's hard for me to think past that, he still won't be able to take the team to the playoffs. I'm believing in that. Maybe, again, not the best reasoning. You can certainly combat me for that, but that's what I see in terms of the AFC playoffs. In terms of what happens in the playoffs and the playoff picture, I will leave those things up to personal interpretation. I will say I think the Kansas City Chiefs are going to three-peat, unfortunately, this year. I did pick them to win the Super Bowl. I do have them winning the Super Bowl. Who they beat from the NFC, it's kind of disappointing. I have the Detroit Lions representing the NFC in the Super Bowl. The Week 1 matchup from 2 years ago, a rematch of that. I think that's what the Super Bowl is. Feels weird for me to predict it, but hey, I'm usually wrong. So maybe I jinxed the Chiefs this year. Those are my overall season predictions. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. I will have a couple more videos coming up on this channel tomorrow. One will be going over, obviously, the recent conversation with the 49ers in terms of Jed York, ownership, Kyle Shanahan, grants reporting, all of that. I'm going to give you my comprehensive look at that. And then another one will be previewing the 49ers versus the Jets. Matchups that I see could give the 49ers troubles, matchups I like for the 49ers. Please let me know if you like this slide format. I plan to continue it in the future. Again, sorry for the lack of frequency with some of these YouTube videos. I've been under tremendous stress and pressure at work recently. That has been easing up, and I plan to definitely get going more now that the season is started. Guys, this video was powered by BetUS. Thank you so much for joining. Looking forward to a great football season with all of you. Go 49ers.